find that they must look at the same.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and it is the newspaper review segment again. This morning, with very exciting newspapers here on the offer, once you're tuned to us. We will begin, as usual, with the Daily Trust. And the major headline today on the Daily Trust is, I won't support Atiku, others against Tinubu, and this is from President Muhammadu Buhari, with the riders there. President would fail woefully if he contests again, former VP. Voters, not your support, will determine winner. That is according to Labour Party. Atiku meets Wike in London today. There have been interesting developments around this meeting, whether it's happening in London or happening in France. And somebody said to me, well, France from London is just 1 hour apart, so they can as well have breakfast in London and lunch in France, whatever the case is. You'll find the details of this story on page 4 of the Daily Trust. And there we have the major photographs there of recovered arms and arrested bandits being displayed there by the first public relations officer, Olumuyiwa Adejobi, parading suspected armed robbers and kidnappers along with weapons recovered from them by the intelligence response team at the headquarters of the Force Intelligence Bureau in Abuja yesterday. You would see all kinds of, but you know, the public will continue to raise stories. Every time these attacks are made, it appears that the guns that we hear about and the nature are more sophisticated than these dang rotting guns that we often see every time on display. But that will be discussions for another day. And we have a belt there right beneath those the pictures on the front page, which reads, FEC OK's 44 billion road project in Northeast as Yobe, Kebbi, Taraba gets 28 billion refund. You find the details of that on page 6. FG Malls concessioning of Abuja Kaduna Rail surveillance. The details of that is on page 6 also. Ministry, NFF blame FIFA as Falconet stranded in Istanbul. I mean, Ibrahim, you saw the pictures of those. Those are very sorry pictures. If that is the way we treat athletes, it's no wonder why, you know, they don't find, you know, how would I use the language now? They don't find the encouragement to give their best to this country.
Exactly, yeah? and you find them going out to other countries, represent other countries as well.
And coming out in flying and blazing above their colleagues. NDDC director in EFCC nets over 25 billion fraud. Interesting. And writes below the name marks there, why we met IBB Abdul Salami over Muslim ticket. This is coming from Babachir. It appears this conversation is still on. Discos record 774 billion collections in Q1, that is Q1, false restructuring. You'll find the details of that on page 20. Days after NNPC pacts, Shell others begin process to end lawsuit. You will get the details of this on page 19. These are the major headlines on the front page of this day of Daily Trust newspaper. I beg your pardon.
The next paper we're going to look at is the Punch newspaper, which carries this major headline on the front page. UK meeting, PDP worries over Wike, NWC meets governorship candidates. And it comes with riders here that says Wike making PDP's efforts to liberate Nigerians difficult, says a BOT member. Events worrisome, Wike's interest cannot supersede parties, Makarfi and chairman. While when Wike speaks, Rivers people listen, aid replies ex-governor Lamido. That is the major headline on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning. Going to the bottom of the page there's a headline that reads, strike, no end in sight, state varsities insist. Details of that are on page 10. Lagos lawyer arraigned for trafficking 11-year-old girl, and Lagos logistics hub to boost 5 trillion naira food market. Going on to the top of the front page there, discos rake in 777 billion naira from 10.2 million electricity consumers. And don't elect incompetent leaders, Sanusi tells Nigerians. That is a story on page 8. Looking at the economy now, forex inflows dropped 17% to $6.6 billion. And that is a story on page 20. While going to the Oil sector now, Shell, ExxonMobil and lawsuits against NNPC. Details of that can be found on page 20 as well. Talking about security now, Wadume military panel clears 10 soldiers, Balarabe promoted. And you can find that on page 26 of the Punch newspaper. Now, these are the major headlines on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
And moving on quickly to the Nation's newspaper, we have there as the major headline, 2023, my support is for APC candidates only, says Buhari. Ex-members contesting in other parties are on their own. Aggrieved APC senators shelve defection plans. You'll find the details of the story when you get a copy of the Nation's newspaper. And moving on to other stories on the front page, ICPC chair Sands slams judiciary for enabling corruption. Falana Ozokeme urges judges to be courageous. You'll find the details of that on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Lamido lacks electoral value, says Wike's aide. Aggrieved governorship candidate besiege PDP leadership. World Bank, U.S. commits $3 billion to Nigeria's energy transition plan. You'll find the details of that on page 2. And right above the name marks, we have knowledge, vision, courage, stands Tinubu out. If you want to know who is saying that, you should pick up the Nation and look at page 2. Akpata, looting of materials of MBA conference, shameful. You will recall that there were videos trending around one of the halls where you had so many people. It wasn't very clear at the time what the agitations were, but it turned out to be conference bags and the rest of them that were not shared, causing, well, it's unfortunate. Federal government urges Canada to relax visa conditions. You'll find that on page 3. With all of this call about, stories about Nigerians relocating, if the visa is any less strenuous than it is right now, we'll wake up one day and
find out there's nobody around.
There's nobody around. Excess crude account grows by $93.944 million in 30 days. That's some sharing news. These are the major details on the front page of the Nation newspaper.
The next paper we're looking at right now is the First News newspaper, and it carries this major headline: Wike Tinubu Europe parley fallout. Atiku jets out to London, meets Rivers governor today. And the writer here that says makes last-ditch effort to end rift and woo Wike. That is the major headline on the front page of First News newspaper. Still talking politics, Tinubu is visionary. No basis for comparing him with Obi, says Dele Alake. And still talking about party politics, PDP crisis. Ayu meets governorship candidates behind closed doors. Boasts party will win 2023 polls in 25 states. And here's a statement here attributed to the president. I'll campaign for only APC candidates in 2023. Buhari says defectors are on their own. PAP seeks NDSP's implementation for lasting peace in Niger Delta. And Rider here says program to focus on ages 12 to 18 years. Police arrest pastor, church members over Oro worshippers lynching. And that is a story that you can find on the First News newspaper. $164,000 fraud. EFCC arraigns Cubana manager as court jails accomplice for 3 years. U.S. honors slain Sokoto student Deborah Samuel. That is at the bottom of the front page of the First News newspaper. What Southern Middle Belt leaders told Peter Obi, says Ayo Adebanjo. And talking politics again, 2023 elections, Nigerians will rejoice. Pastor Kumui prophesizes. EFCC arrest grills NDDC account director over 25 billion naira fraud. And what Yobe cleric asked me before I pulled the trigger, says a killer soldier. At the top of the front page here is a headline: You've lost political relevance. Wike fires back at Lamido, and Wike will help Tinubu win 2023 presidential poll, says ex-placeholder Masari. And finally, on the First News newspaper, Yahoo court jails Nance official for 195 million naira fraud. That is quite interesting. So details of that are on the First News newspaper, and those are the headlines this morning.
Moving on to the Nigerian News Direct. We have there as the major headline, 2023 presidential election, Atiku heads for London to settle rift with Wike. Interesting how everything that happens around our polity today has to begin from London or ends with ends with London. As Buhari vows to support only APC candidates, Wike will work for APC. Tinubu. This is according to Masari. You have this story on several other front pages today as it appears. NNPC Limited to raise natural gas reserves to 600 trillion cubic feet. Proposed Ilesha University. Oyetola inaugurates implementation committee. Says varsity not a product of mere fanciful effort. And there we have beneath that major front page picture how court affirmed Adewoyin as substantive national president of Ipman investigation. FEMAD induct LOC ahead of 45th NCAD regular meeting. Police arrest killers of Honorable Musa Mante, CSP Garkwa, 17 others. Governor Abiodun to inaugurate Governing Council of Tertiary Institutions. These are the major servants on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct.
And finally, we take a look at the Blueprint newspaper this morning, which carries this major headline, 2023 presidency, Wike will work for Tinubu, says Masari. And it comes with these riders. Confirms London parley with APC presidential candidate. Buhari for APC candidates, not defectors. Others, says the presidency. And we are unperturbed mood in PDP. Excellent, says Ayu and Bala. Let's have issue-based campaigns, says Upasani, and NILDS cautions Nigerians against sentiments. That is, those are the riders supporting the major headline on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper, and details can be found on page 6. Towards the bottom of the page, as a headline, Nigeria imports $11 billion worth of sugar and pharmaceuticals and plastics. That is on page 22. A man hired by cattle dealer robs owner of 0.6 million naira in Kwara. Nigerian banks ration PTA customers express frustration, and NANS executive, 39 others jailed for internet fraud in Oyo. 268 ghost workers discovered in Kogi High Court payroll. Now that is quite interesting coming from that end. And towards the top of the front page there is the headline, Unilag Sanu Nasu back to trenches, vow to continue strike. And the rider here that says FG undertakers ready to take over university, ASU alleges. Now these are the major headlines on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper this morning.
Now that is a wrap on the front page of the newspapers this morning. We will take a short break. When we return, we will have a guest analyst in the studio ready to serve you details of this front page headlines. Please stay with us.
That's great. But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
Thank you for joining us. If you are just tuning in, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and it's that time again where we take deep insights into the issues that made the front page of most of the national dailies this morning. We have with us in the studio a regular guest, a former captain of the ship that we ride currently, and the editor-in-chief of Deadline newspaper, Malen Nasrul Lawan. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
There are so much on the front pages this morning, from politics to sports to the economy. But I would like to start from the one that seemed to have agitated the minds of most people in the FCT and in Kaduna for a couple of months. I'm talking about the Kaduna-Abuja rail attack. And here we are hearing that the federal government is mulling concessioning of the Abuja-Kaduna rail surveillance to a private sector arrangement. And one would wonder, who better to police this track than the federal government? What is your take on that story?
I believe the federal government should reconsider that stance because this is something that has to do with national security. And I don't think it's something that we should actually be outsourcing. We have the capability, we have the capacity to do it. So why give it out to maybe a private individual to do? Because if you allow that to happen, then it means you will be settling for second-hand information. You will only be getting to hear things that whoever is in charge of the surveillance is telling you. And I don't think this is good for the nation's security.
And just a quick follow-up to that before we pick other items on the front page. As part of the briefing of the minister following the outcomes of FEC yesterday, he mentioned that the federal government now thinks it is insensitive to commence the rail service until the numbers that are left with the so-called terrorists are released. And for the other people, the question really is, why we sympathize with those that are released? Would we continue to shut down critical economic infrastructures on account of this? Because I remember the president saying on a number of occasions that he would not cancel his trip abroad or wherever because of a terrorist attack, because it would mean that we are submitting to their whims and caprices. How does this? What do you make of this position from the government?
Well, it's actually good that the government is trying to show the families of the victims that they are actually concerned, even though some will say it's belated. But I also believe that maybe the government should find a way of restarting the train services, because if you look at the number of people that are actually affected, that's not to say that we shouldn't sympathize with those whose family members are still in captivity. But if we look at those who are actually suffering from the absence of these services, honestly, I think the government should have a rethink. And another thing is the fact that we collected loan, to be able to finance the project. And right now, we are not making any money out of it. So even our ability to actually pay back these loans will be affected by the absence of the train services. So I think the government should try and strike a balance while assuring the family members of all these victims that we are actually on top of the situation, trying to free your loved ones. We are also concerned about the economy, about what's happening to the generality of Nigerians.
All right. Well, still talking a little bit about that. I wouldn't want us to dwell too much on it, but I think this is something that we really should look at. In as much as we want the train services to continue and the government wants to appear to look sensitive towards the plight of those still in captivity, what about the efforts to get them out? I mean, we haven't heard anything about that for some time. Yes, a few were released, but I think all these are based on individual efforts, not a collective by the government.
Well, it's quite unfortunate that the government actually starved us of information with regards to what it is doing about those in captivity and things related to that. Because some will say, if you had done what you needed to do in the beginning, probably we wouldn't be here. Because how can you have maybe a route, that so many people are actually using, and then it can be attacked, just by some people welding AK-47s and what have you. So that's my take on it. That's my biggest concern. Why is the government so laid back, when it comes to issues of security? Because honestly, it has happened. So the government should try and see how it can recover all the lost grounds instead of coming with one policy statement after another.
Okay, even though Ibrahim said we shouldn't dwell much on it, but I have one more question in this regard. In fairness to the government, we have seen some response in recent days. They've been clearing out some of the hideouts of these hoodlums in the last couple of days. We have seen some sight of respite by citizens of Kaduna and those along that corridor. What would you say about this effort in the last couple of days?
It's actually reassuring. Like just a few days back, I was on the Abuja-Kaduna highway. So if you see the things that are happening there is some improvement, you know, in security presence. I think there are like 2 checkpoints now, even though they said it's going to be temporary measures. It's not like it's coming back permanently. And the checkpoints are actually situated along the 2 flash points. That's shortly after the Greenfield University. I think a place called, can't remember the name of the place now. And then near Gidambusa, and which are 2 notorious flash points. So it's actually good that the government is like trying to reassure the people, because so many people are using that route and there is no alternative to it. Like 7 states, you know, northwestern states are actually using the routes, including some states in the northeastern part of the country.
Interesting.
All right, well, let's talk politics now. The front pages of the newspapers have been inundated with, from mostly the PDP crisis or non-crisis, as the PDP members would like to say, that there is no crisis and that it is a family affair. But it's actually a family affair that has woken up the entire neighborhood. And from accusations to counter-accusations, people pointing fingers at each other, calling people's relevance into question. What do you make of this whole entire situation now, with the new dynamic of Wike now meeting Tinubu somewhere and eyebrows being raised by the PDP members themselves? What do you make of the entire situation?
Well, you can see even within the PDP, like you rightly observed, opinion is actually divided. While some believe the Rivers State governor should actually be engaged, you know, and even pacified, so that the party can come back and work as one. Others are actually saying that no, you should just allow him to, like what the former governor of Jigawa State was saying, that allow him to feel like the big man that he thinks he is. But you should like do as if he does not exist, so that, because if you continue to engage him without engaging other parts of the party, you may end up losing on the 2 sides. So, but if you look at the position, the status of Rivers State, especially to the PDP, because it has always been traditionally, you know, a PDP state. And when so many people are actually saying that you can't really predict what will happen in 2023, so people are trying not to leave open spaces where their counterparts, the opposition can always latch on. But I also believe that it's good that even the presidential candidate of the PDP is also engaging with Wike, because he is going to be either the biggest beneficiary or the biggest loser in the event that they fail to get the Rivers State governor back on.
But do you think Wike is that important? Do you think he's that strategic, getting him back into the fold? Is it really that crucial for the PDP?
I think it is, even though some are making the argument that there are, you know, so many candidates, some running for seats in the National Assembly. You also have those running for the State Assembly and what have you. But if you look at the influence of state governors in Nigeria, I wouldn't be surprised if all these candidates happen to get the ticket because of the influence of the governor. So to say that he shouldn't be engaged, honestly, I don't think it's a good thing to even say. He is important, but of course to an extent. And the fact that he is important should not mean allowing other sections of the party to feel as if they don't matter. Because right now, that's what some of them are actually alleging, that, okay, you have concentrated all your energy on Wike, while there are so many other things you can also focus on.
Interesting developments there with the People's Democratic Party. But again, staying with politics, the president is saying, I won't support Atiku, others against Tinubu. Isn't that expected, really? Why does he have to emphasize this positioning?
Yeah, I think that statement from the presidency came, I'm not sure, but I think it came because of the pronouncements made by, I think, the current member of the House of Reps representing Kano Municipal, who, defected to the ADP. And he granted an interview to the BBC House of Service where he was like trying to say he has the support of the president, even though he is now in ADP, and that they are not even going to concentrate their energy on their party alone. On other places, they may go with PDP, they may go with APC, because what they will do is actually to look for the best, what is best for Kano, and then settle for it. So the president is like trying to reassure the people that, look, I'm not part of that, because like you said, it's to be expected. If you are still a member of the party, then
editor, this president's comments is coming on the backdrop of the way he also behaved in the process in the period leading to his current term. He showed up in some states and he said, vote for me for the presidential and the gubernatorial, vote whoever you chooses. And he said that in Ogun State, he repeated that in Lagos State, and I think he did that in Imo State. Is that, are the party members not learning from the precedent that he seemed to have set?
No, but if you remember, then there were like factions, you have two different people claiming the same ticket. So he was like trying to say that, no, I'm not like, for one against the other. So whoever you think should fly the party's flag, you should support him. Because if you fail to do that, then the supporters of the other party will think, since you are not with us, then maybe we should also start thinking of who to support instead of our own candidate.
Well, still staying with that, I just want to ask you this quick question. I want to get your opinion on this. The president's support, with the current popularity the president actually has right now, does the president's support carry as much weight as it should, in your own opinion?
No, it doesn't, because just like so many people are saying, if the president is run for another election, I'm not saying he will not win, but certainly it's not going to be with the same margin that, he was able to win in previous elections, because so many things have happened, and if you look at the mood of the generality of Nigerians, even though some will say what you see is not what you always get in politics, because people may be complaining, and then on the eve of the election, you won't know what happened. Maybe some will say stomach infrastructure, some will say no, maybe money is involved and things like that. So before you know it, you see people that are actually coming out to say, no, we are not in support of this candidate, changing their positions overnight.
Okay, I will be taking something from the front page of the Daily Trust. If producers they can please return that for our viewers' interest. And that is the photographs there of the suspected armed robbers and kidnappers being paraded. I would like your perspective. I see these ding guns, rotting. I wonder if these guns can even sustain some of the kind of sophisticated operations we see from this. It does look like, materials that have been paraded from an archives rather than the kind. I mean, if you have had a close shave with this attack, you know that the sound of the guns you hear are nothing close to the things that are on parade. What runs through your mind every time you see these kind of pictures?
First, I would want to say that I'm not a fan of all this parading and what have you. We have the courts. You know, whatever you are able to establish against the suspect, take them to court and let the court decide their fate. Let me give you an example with what happened recently in New York, that's in the United States of America, with Salman Rushdie. You know, he was attacked on the 12th of August, if I can still remember. A day after, the suspect was already in court. So why can't we do the same? Because right now, so many people will say the police maybe are doing this just to show the people that we are actually working. And you can't actually tell me there is security by simply displaying all these, like you said, all these den guns and what have you. I should be able to know if there is security. If I don't feel secured, there is no other way you can change the narrative for me. So I think the police should find a better way of handling the fight against insecurity, displaying all these guns that actually look the same, because anytime they parade these people, you know, maybe it's only the suspects that
varies.
Yeah, because all the other things remain the same. You know, they will be flashing one AK-47, one gun one, and then some machetes. And honestly, like I said, I don't think that's the way to go.
Well, before we go into the next story, let us put it on record that it's been 434 days since 11 schoolgirls of the FGC Brini Yauri were taken. We hope that whatever efforts the government is making would include how to return these girls to their parents. 433 days would mean over 1 year of trauma to the family of these girls, to the community where they were taken. I hope that is part of our national action plan for a complete healing. And we still have one student of the Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, still in captivity 417 days after the incident. I can't begin to imagine how the parents of these kids currently feel. To think that every other person has been released save for that one child over 1 year, that would be some trauma for the family. And then I would like to get this perspective from our analyst in the studio. We saw the Babachir team that seemed to have been touring everywhere in the country make a quick stop in Mina by General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, former military president, all in the quest to carry on the conversation around the Muslim ticket. What's your perspective? Isn't this tiring at this time of the campaign? Shouldn't we have moved beyond this conversation right now?
Well, even if it is tiring for them, it is not. You can see the effort that they are actually putting into all this. But maybe they should know that for now, the Muslim ticket for APC seems like a done deal. You know, they have decided on that. Maybe there is no going back on it. But they also have a right to continue their consultations. And somehow they are coming close to what I expected them to do earlier. That's because we have other candidates. You know, we have like 18 registered political parties, and I think we have like 17 or so presidential candidates. So they can settle for whoever they think is important. Already they are talking about the fact that they have alternatives. There is the NNPP, Kwankwaso, there is the LP, Labour Party, Peter Obi. There is also the former vice president, you know, in the PDP. So they have like options. It's now left to them to decide who do you think you should support. And being members of the APC, I don't know how they will be able to do that. Are they like going to withdraw from the party before they do that? Or are they just like going to remain within the party and then work against the party's interests? That's what I can say.
Well, that remains to be seen. Interesting days lie ahead. With the campaigns coming up, we hope to see more interesting developments. Nasir Lawal, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And we've actually enjoyed the in-depth analysis that you've offered. And we're definitely sure you'll come back.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so this is how we're going to wrap up the newspaper review on today's episode of Daybreak. We'll take a break right now, and we will return with the show at the top of the hour. Do stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that look at the
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
Because I have said that